Picture this. You are Marcus Flavius, a palace food taster in Emperor Claudius's court, standing in the marble corridors of the Palatine Hill in Rome. The morning light filters through the painted windows, casting shadows that dance across the mosaic floors like omens of death. You can hear the distant clatter of bronze cooking pots from the imperial kitchens, mixed with the nervous whispers of fellow servants who've been acting strangely all week. The air smells of frankincense and fear, though you don't yet understand why everyone seems to be avoiding the mushroom course that's been prepared for tonight's banquet. You're adjusting the purple silk on the dining couches, dreaming of the denarius coins you'll earn this month to send home to your family in Gaul. You have no idea that in 6 hours, you'll watch the most powerful man on earth convulse in agony, and the woman standing in the shadows behind you, calmly grinding herbs with a knowing smile, will reveal herself as history's first documented serial killer. This moment of routine palace duty is the last time you'll ever feel safe around food, around women, or around the very air you breathe. The woman watching you is named Locusta, though most in the palace know her simply as the herbalist from Gaul. She's perhaps 40 years old, with the weathered hands of someone who's spent decades handling deadly plants, and eyes that seem to catalog every weakness in everyone she meets. What you don't know, what nobody except her closest conspirators know, is that she's already responsible for dozens of deaths across the empire. And tonight, she's about to claim her most prestigious victim yet. Her fingers, stained permanently green from handling toxic vegetation, are preparing a dose of poison so perfectly calibrated that it will kill an emperor while leaving no trace that modern forensics couldn't detect for another 2,000 years. Before diving into this forgotten story of systematic murder and imperial conspiracy, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. The numbers alone will change how you see ancient Rome forever. Modern historians estimate that Locusta was directly responsible for at least 40 documented deaths, but her influence on Roman politics through systematic poisoning may have affected hundreds more. She operated for over 15 years at the highest levels of imperial power, her services so valued that she received imperial protection, her own laboratory, and a staff of apprentices who learned her deadly craft. But these statistics tell only the surface of a killing machine so precisely calibrated that it operated in plain sight, with victims' families often thanking her for her medical expertise, even as she murdered their loved ones. Locusta didn't start as a serial killer. She began as what Romans called a veneficia, a professional poisoner whose services were available to anyone with enough gold and the right connections. In the violent world of Roman politics, poison was considered a sophisticated alternative to the crude brutality of assassination by sword or strangling. It was clean, deniable, and could be disguised as natural death in a world where sudden illness was common and medical understanding was primitive. The demand for Locusta's expertise grew as word spread through Rome's underground networks about a Gallic woman who could eliminate problems with a precision that bordered on artistry. Her workshop was located in the Suburra district, Rome's crowded slums where the scent of exotic herbs could blend with 1,000 other smells without arousing suspicion. Here, in a building that appeared to be an ordinary physician's clinic, Locusta developed what would become the ancient world's most sophisticated understanding of toxicology. She cultivated relationships with merchants who imported rare plants from across the empire, learning which combination of substances could mimic common diseases, which doses would kill quickly versus slowly, and most importantly, which poisons would leave no detectable traces in the victim's body. But Locusta's transformation from hired killer to serial murderer began when she discovered something that would drive her for the rest of her life. She didn't just enjoy the money and power that came from her profession. She was genuinely fascinated by death itself, by the precise moment when life left a body, by the different ways human beings reacted to various toxins. What started as professional competence evolved into scientific curiosity, and then into something much darker, a genuine pleasure in the act of killing that had nothing to do with money or politics. Your first glimpse of Locusta's true nature comes 3 days before the imperial banquet, when you're sent to the palace kitchens to inspect the preparations for Emperor Claudius's birthday celebration. The head cook, a Greek named Apollodorus, introduces you to the visiting herbalist who's been consulting on the menu's medicinal aspects. Romans believe strongly in the healing properties of food, and wealthy households often employ specialists to ensure their meals promote health and longevity. Locusta seems perfectly suited to this role, discussing the digestive benefits of various spices and the energizing properties of different mushroom varieties with the authority of someone who spent decades studying plants. But you notice something odd about the way she watches people. When a young kitchen slave accidentally cuts his finger while chopping vegetables, Locusta's eyes don't show sympathy or concern. Instead, she observes the blood flow with the clinical interest of someone conducting an experiment. She offers to treat the wound with a special salve, and while her ministrations seem helpful, you catch her making small marks in a wax tablet, as if recording data about how quickly the cut heals or how the boy reacts to her treatment. That evening, the kitchen slave becomes violently ill. Apollodorus dismisses it as too much wine, but you notice Locusta lingering near the boy's sleeping area, watching his symptoms with that same clinical fascination. The next morning, he's dead. When you mention this to other servants, they remind you that kitchen accidents happen frequently, that young slaves often die from various ailments, and that speculating about such matters could be dangerous for someone in your position. But something about Locusta's reaction to the death unsettles you. She doesn't seem surprised or saddened. If anything, she appears satisfied, like a craftsman who's successfully tested a new technique. The systematic nature of Locusta's killing becomes clear when you realize she's been experimenting on palace staff for weeks before the main event. That kitchen slave wasn't a victim of circumstance. He was a test subject. Locusta needed to calibrate her dosages, to understand how different body types and ages would react to her poisons, to perfect her technique before attempting something as dangerous as killing an emperor. The other servants who've died recently, the ones everyone attributed to seasonal illnesses or accidents, were all part of her preparation process. On October 13th, as evening approaches and the imperial banquet begins, you take your position in the dining hall with a growing sense of dread. Your job as food taster is to sample each dish before it's served to Emperor Claudius, but tonight that responsibility feels more like a death sentence. You've been watching Locusta move through the palace with increasing unease, noting how she always seems to be present when food is being prepared, how she offers helpful suggestions about seasoning and presentation, how her stained fingers touch plates and goblets with casual precision. The banquet unfolds with typical Roman grandeur. Claudius, now 64 and showing his age, reclines on his dining couch surrounded by courtiers, senators, and family members including his wife Agrippina and her teenage son Nero. The conversation flows between politics, philosophy, and gossip while servants bring course after course of elaborate dishes. You taste each one, waiting the prescribed interval to ensure no immediate reaction before nodding for the emperor's service. Everything seems normal, even pleasant, until the mushroom course arrives. Locusta has prepared what she calls a special variety of mushrooms, claiming they're a delicacy from her native Gaul that will aid the emperor's digestion and provide energy for his evening's entertainment. The dish smells incredible, earthy and rich, with herbs that make your mouth water despite your anxiety. You take your ritual taste, wait the standard period, and detect nothing unusual. The mushrooms are delicious, with a slightly sweet aftertaste that suggests honey or exotic spices. You give your approval, and the dish is served to Claudius with great ceremony. The emperor eats enthusiastically, praising the unique flavor and asking Locusta to prepare more of these mushrooms for future occasions. She accepts his compliments with modest pleasure, explaining that the special preparation requires rare ingredients and precise timing. For nearly an hour, everything seems perfectly normal. Claudius continues eating, drinking, and participating in conversation. You begin to think your suspicions were unfounded, that perhaps you've been allowing palace gossip to cloud your judgment. Then Claudius begins to sweat. At first, it seems like nothing more than the natural result of a warm evening and rich food. But you notice Locusta watching the emperor with that familiar, clinical interest, and your stomach drops as you realize what's happening. The poison she's used isn't designed to work immediately. It's been carefully timed to allow her to establish an alibi and distance herself from the obvious cause. By the time symptoms appear, hours may have passed since the poisoned food was consumed. The emperor's condition deteriorates rapidly, but subtly. He begins slurring his words, which guests initially attribute to wine. His movements become unsteady, which could be explained by his age and the evening's indulgences. But you can see the fear growing in his eyes as he realizes something is seriously wrong. When he tries to stand and collapses, sending goblets and plates crashing to the floor, the festive atmosphere transforms into chaos. Locusta springs into action with practiced efficiency, presenting herself as a concerned healer rather than the cause of the emperor's distress. She examines Claudius with apparent expertise, suggesting he's suffered from a common digestive ailment brought on by rich food and recommending immediate treatment with herbs she just happens to have prepared. What the panicked courtiers don't realize is that she's administering a second dose of poison, this one designed to finish what the mushrooms started while appearing to be legitimate medical care. You watch in horror as the most powerful man in the world dies in agony, while the woman who killed him kneels beside him, pretending to attempt healing while actually ensuring his death. Claudius's final moments are marked by convulsions and desperate gasping, but Locusta maintains her concerned healer persona throughout, even shedding what appear to be genuine tears as she pronounces the emperor beyond saving. Her performance is so convincing that Agrippina thanks her personally for her efforts and promises her a reward for her loyalty during the crisis. The aftermath reveals the full scope of Locusta's manipulation and planning. Within hours of Claudius's death, Agrippina moves to place her 16-year-old son Nero on the throne, bypassing Claudius's biological heir, Britannicus. This rapid succession wasn't possible without prior planning, and it becomes clear that Locusta's poisoning of Claudius was part of a larger conspiracy to reshape imperial power. The herbalist, who appeared to be randomly present at the palace, had actually been working with Agrippina for months, waiting for the perfect opportunity to eliminate the emperor and clear the path for Nero's ascension. But Claudius was just the beginning of Locusta's imperial career. As Nero consolidated power, he found himself with a new problem. His step, brother Britannicus, Claudius's legitimate heir, posed a constant threat to his rule. Rather than risk the political complications of a traditional assassination, Nero turned to the woman who had proven her capabilities so effectively. Locusta was secretly brought into the imperial household as a trusted advisor, given resources and protection in exchange for her continued services. The murder of Britannicus demonstrated Locusta's evolving expertise and growing boldness. The young man was killed during a palace dinner in full view of dozens of witnesses, but Locusta's method was so sophisticated that most observers initially believed he had suffered an epileptic seizure. She had developed a poison that mimicked the symptoms of common medical conditions, allowing murder to masquerade as natural death even under close scrutiny. The few who suspected foul play had no evidence, and no recourse against someone under imperial protection. For you, watching these events unfold from your position as a palace servant, the true horror isn't just the individual murders, but the systematic nature of what's happening. Locusta isn't killing randomly or even primarily for money. She's conducting what amounts to scientific experiments on human subjects, using the resources of the imperial court to perfect techniques of murder that she genuinely seems to enjoy. The woman who appeared to be a helpful herbalist has revealed herself as someone who takes genuine pleasure in the precise application of death. The scope of Locusta's operation becomes clear as her influence within the palace grows. She's given her own workshop within the imperial complex, staffed with assistants who help her cultivate poison plants and prepare various toxins. This isn't just a single killer working alone. It's an entire infrastructure dedicated to systematic murder, operating with imperial approval and protection. Locusta trains apprentices in her methods, creating a network of poisoners who can operate throughout the empire under her guidance. Her victims during this period include political opponents of Nero's regime, inconvenient relatives, and anyone whose death might benefit the emperor's interests. But increasingly, Locusta seems to select targets based on her own curiosity rather than political necessity. She experiments with different poison combinations, tests various delivery methods, and studies the effects of toxins on different types of victims. Palace records from this period, discovered centuries later, suggest she maintained detailed notes about her murders, treating each death as data for her ongoing research into the science of killing. The systematic nature of Locusta's murders reveals something unprecedented in the ancient world. The world's first documented serial killer, operating with official sanction. Unlike the random violence or crime of passion murders that characterized most ancient killings, Locusta's work showed clear patterns, methodical planning, and psychological motivations that went beyond mere profit or political advantage. She killed because she enjoyed killing, because she was fascinated by death, and because she had found a way to indulge these impulses while gaining wealth, power, and protection. Modern forensic psychology recognizes patterns in Locusta's behavior that align perfectly with contemporary understanding of serial killers. She showed the classic triad of characteristics: a methodical approach to victim selection, genuine pleasure derived from the act of killing, and a desire to perfect her techniques through repeated practice. Her experiments on palace servants before major assassinations demonstrate the same pattern of escalation seen in modern serial killers, who begin with small victims before moving to more significant targets. The international scope of Locusta's influence becomes apparent when examining Roman diplomatic records from Nero's reign. Foreign ambassadors and visiting dignitaries who died suddenly during their stays in Rome often showed symptoms consistent with poisoning, suggesting that Locusta's services extended beyond domestic politics to international relations. The woman who started as a local hired killer had become an instrument of imperial foreign policy, eliminating inconvenient foreigners with the same clinical precision she applied to Roman victims. But perhaps most disturbing is the evidence that Locusta genuinely enjoyed her work in ways that went beyond professional pride or financial gain. Contemporary accounts describe her demeanor during and after murders as notably calm and often pleased, like an artist who has successfully completed a challenging piece. She reportedly kept trophies from some victims, maintained detailed records of their deaths, and seemed to take particular satisfaction in murders that required complex planning or innovative techniques. The end of Locusta's career came not because her crimes were discovered, but because her imperial protector died. When Nero was forced to commit suicide in 68 AD, Locusta suddenly found herself without the protection that had allowed her to operate freely. The new emperor Galba had no use for Nero's poisoner, and no interest in protecting someone associated with his predecessor's excesses. Within months of Nero's death, Locusta was arrested, tried, and executed, bringing to an end a career that had spanned nearly 2 decades and claimed at least 40 documented victims. The historical impact of Locusta's work extended far beyond her individual crimes. She had demonstrated that systematic murder could be conducted at the highest levels of government with minimal risk if the killer possessed sufficient skill and protection. Her techniques and methods were studied and copied by subsequent generations of assassins, and her influence can be traced through the poisoning cases that plagued Roman imperial succession for centuries after her death. Modern forensic analysis of imperial remains from this period has confirmed many details about Locusta's methods that ancient sources recorded. Chemical traces in bone and tissue samples show evidence of arsenic, mercury, and plant-based toxins that match contemporary descriptions of her preferred poisons. This scientific verification of ancient accounts provides unprecedented insight into the techniques used by the world's first documented serial killer. For you, Marcus Flavius, the food taster who witnessed these events, the psychological impact lasted far beyond the immediate horror of watching emperors die. Ancient sources suggest that palace servants who survived Locusta's reign often suffered from what we would now recognize as post-traumatic stress, becoming paranoid about food, distrustful of authority figures, and unable to form normal relationships. The systematic nature of the killings you witnessed created a climate of terror that affected everyone who came into contact with the imperial court during this period. The discovery of Locusta's detailed records, hidden away in her workshop and found centuries later during archaeological excavations, provides a chilling window into the mind of antiquity's most prolific killer. Her notes reveal a woman who approached murder with scientific methodology, recording victim responses to different poisons, noting which techniques worked most efficiently, and developing increasingly sophisticated methods for avoiding detection. These documents represent some of the earliest examples of what modern criminologists would recognize as a serial killer's trophy collection. What makes Locusta's story particularly disturbing isn't just the scale of her crimes, but how completely she was able to integrate systematic murder into the normal functioning of imperial government. She didn't operate in the shadows or hide from authority. She worked openly, with official protection and approval, turning assassination into a bureaucratic process. The herbalist, who appeared to be a helpful member of the imperial household, was actually running what amounted to a murder factory in the heart of the Roman Empire. The woman who poisoned emperors for pleasure represents something unprecedented in human history. The first documented case of serial killing operating with governmental sanction and protection. Her legacy influenced not just the techniques of assassination, but the entire culture of imperial Rome, creating an atmosphere where sudden death was so common that few questioned its causes, and where the most trusted servants might be the most dangerous threats. As we reflect on this dark chapter of Roman history, Locusta's story serves as a reminder of how thin the line can be between civilization and barbarism, between healing and harming, between protection and predation. Her ability to operate freely for decades while committing systematic murder reveals something troubling about human nature and political power that remains relevant today. The woman who started as a simple herbalist and became history's first serial killer achieved a kind of immortality through her crimes, but it's an immortality built on suffering and death. Her victims, from unknown slaves to powerful emperors, deserve to be remembered not just as statistics in her catalog of murder, but as human beings whose lives were cut short by someone who found genuine pleasure in the act of killing. If this glimpse into history's hidden darkness has left you wanting to uncover more buried truths, I've prepared another journey into the shadows of the past that you won't want to miss. Click on the video appearing on your screen now to discover another shocking chapter that history tried to erase. And if you found this exploration as compelling as I did, hit that subscribe button so we can continue peeling back the layers of history together. These forgotten voices deserve to be heard, and there are so many more stories waiting to be told.